Good evening. My name is Lorene Phillips, and on behalf of Impact Austin, I'd like to welcome you to Increase Your Impact, which is a part of our Discovery Day 2021 series. Before I introduce our speakers, I just want to share a little bit about my journey with Impact Austin and how I became involved. I was attending a fundraising event for another nonprofit, met a member of Impact Austin who said to me, "We need to get you involved," and I'm not even sure what we were talking about, but at some point she said to me, "We really need to get you involved in Impact Austin." I, of course, said, "Well, what is Impact Austin?" And so she proceeded to tell me and that she'd like for me to attend an event that they were having that they were calling Coffees. And so I said, okay, when and where? And at the time, we were meeting at Grapevine Market. Now, keep in mind that she said coffee, so I get there expecting it to be a coffee of some sort. Well, turns out it wasn't. It was wine and hors d'oeuvres, and it was very, very nice. And had the opportunity to hear the founder, Rebecca Powers, speak. And I got to tell you, it was so energizing just to hear her enthusiasm and to learn about the plans that the organization had. And also, right about that time, I had reached the conclusion that I was a little bit weary of galas and fundraising events and fancy gowns and that sort of thing, and not netting a lot of money through that avenue to fund programs for those organizations. So it was right about the right time for me, and so I officially stalked the organization for a couple of meetings and events, and at some point decided that the model was right for me because it truly was an opportunity for my dollars to have more of an impact than they were. And so, on the basis of that, I joined and became involved and have been on committees. I was on the board and then became the chair of the board, and worked on grant committees and anything else that helped to move the organization along. I was very, very willing to do that because of the mission and the strength of the organization. So that's just a little bit, a high-level overview of my introduction into Impact Austin and how I became involved. And I will tell you that it has truly been addicting, and I think that that's largely because of the impact that we have had in the Austin community. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. I'd like to thank our Discovery Day sponsors who are responsible for making this event possible. Our premier sponsors are C2C Media and Dochin Realtors. I'd also like to thank the leadership sponsors, leadership and philanthropy level sponsors as well. And again, these group of folks are making these events possible. I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of Impact Austin, who we are and how we are managing to impact this community in a very, very powerful way. It is a local group of women who have a philanthropic bent, if you will, and it's open to any female identifying person in the community. And to date, our members, one at a time, have donated over $7.4 million and put that into the Austin area. We certainly thank present and past members for that, because without your support, we would not have been able to do that over the 17 years that we've been operating in the Central Texas area. Given out over 94 grants, serving 69 organizations, and a little bit more than 2,200 women philanthropists, it's hard to get that word out, have been key to the success of the organization. And it is so rewarding when you see the impact that we have, or you go to one of the check presentations that we make, or you see an organization that has our sign on their vehicle, that we've made it possible for them to do the work that they do. So please give consideration to joining this group of powerful women who are making a significant impact in the Austin community. Check us out on our website. And if cost is a barrier and you're interested, please talk to me or to one of the other members of Impact Austin, and we will find a way to make it happen for you. We are recording this session today, so you will be able to go back and reference it on our Discovery Day webpage at a later date. We will also have a question and answer function. Put your questions in the chat feature, and we'll get back to those before the end of the session. So it is my pleasure to introduce the speakers for the evening. Connee Sullivan is an Impact Austin member, class of 2017. She is also on the Grants Review Committee. Lorene Lewis, class of 2020, is on the Advancement Committee. And Jenny Cotner, who is our first speaker, class of 2018, and is currently on the board. And I think before the session is over, you will very quickly realize that once you get in, we got you. So these ladies have been able to get in and find their niche and are working very hard to help us continue this mission. So please listen, and then at the end of the session, just join us.
Thank you, Lorene. So welcome, everybody. Tonight you will hear about different but not all ways of volunteering with Impact Austin. My first volunteer experience was on the Spring 2018 Education GRC. I had just joined Impact Austin a few months earlier. Similar to Lorene, I had joined through a coffee that didn't really seem to involve a whole lot of coffee. It was hosted by two women I knew from a professional organization. And that's really how I first came to know Impact Austin. So I joined and got on a GRC right away. And it was my first exposure to the work of collective giving. And by work, I mean more than just writing a check as I had been doing for many years. What was the work? Well, it was reviewing 32 letters of intent and then 6 full grant applications and all the underlying lively discussions. It was hard, but we ultimately narrowed it down to 2 finalists who then made presentations to the full membership at our annual meeting. But I called it work, but it really wasn't just work. It was also what I like to call a joy of volunteering experience, not just making an impact, but being impacted myself. I was impacted by learning about 32 nonprofits in the Austin area. And at the time I was pretty new to Austin. So it was a great introduction to what were some of the smaller nonprofits I had never heard about before, and as well as their proposals for improving education, since it was the Education GRC. The other thing that came out of the GRC was really making my first friends in Impact Austin. I often describe us as the best group of women in Austin, and getting to know more of them and getting to know them better by working with them on a GRC or other volunteer opportunity, and not just chatting at events, is part of the joy of volunteering. Needless to say, after that wonderful GRC experience, I joined the board. And a side note, the GRC process has been streamlined since then. So if I'm scaring anybody off by talking about work, there's now less work for both GRCs and applicants, but with the same great outcomes. So turning now to what board service is all about. And Nicole, if you could share my first slide, that would be great. Board service is another way of volunteering. It's the same joys of making an impact and being impacted through learning and friendships that I experienced on that first GRC. It is a longer commitment than a GRC, so you learn more and you get to know others better. The board is also smaller than GRCs. We currently have 10 members. Our bylaws allow up to 15. So you get to know your fellow volunteers on the board pretty well. We're a working and a governing board. And when I first joined the board, I didn't know there was a distinction. So let me explain. It means we continue to be part of the volunteer power that makes Impact Austin happen. Plus, we do all the oversight stuff you expect of a board. And many of us continue to serve on GRCs, and some board members even lead GRCs. We can also volunteer on other committees because, again, we're working in a governing board. We touch a wide range of issues important to Impact Austin members and community partners. And I've listed a couple on the slide. Two of my favorites that I'll talk briefly about were the first two. And when I say briefly, I could probably talk at length about both, but I won't, or I'll try not to. So one of my favorites, which happened this past summer, was helping to figure out how to allocate grant-making dollars so spring and fall grants are comparable in size. It still bugs me to no end that spring 2020 grants were $100,000 each and the fall SIG grant was only $40,000. With some of the work I and other board members and finance committee members did, that won't happen again, and our spring and fall grants will always be comparable in size. Another thing that the board was involved in was supporting the technology committee in replacing grant software. So on that first GRC I joined in the spring of 2018, I heard a lot about the system we used then to track grants. It was clunky and hard to use. And probably the best thing I've ever heard anyone say about it is that complaining about it was a bonding experience for GRC members. So the technology committee in, I want to say 2019, worked very hard to figure out a new system and how to implement it to replace that old one. And having been on a GRC more recently, I can say it's definitely a lot easier to use. Turning to board member expectations, most simply, what we want on the board or who we want on the board is, sorry, I'm trying to advance one of my slides, myself on my own screen. Most simply, we want women who believe in Impact Austin and who want to serve on the board. The formal expectations are showing on your screen right now. And the most important thing to note there is no expectation of prior board service or of knowing the difference between working and governing boards. Many of our board members who are listed on the right-hand side of the screen are not only first-term board members with Impact Austin, we're first-time board members, period. Just emphasizing the need or the expectation that there is no expectation of prior board experience. Joining the board and being part of it is part of the hands-on philanthropic education Impact Austin provides and great development. My volunteer work on the board has exposed me to a broader set of management styles and skills in my fellow board members than I've experienced in most corporate environments. Most board members serve on one board committee. I happen to serve on two. I'm on the finance committee because of my professional background in financial analysis, and that was the original committee I was asked to join. I later joined the governance committee, which I now chair. We have the responsibility for board recruiting, and that's why I'm speaking to you now. The other board committees are advancement, which you will hear about in a few minutes, personnel, and strategic planning. All board members, as I said, are expected to serve on at least one board committee. The other thing I'd like to mention is that you don't have to be a board member to be on a board committee. It's a great way to dip your toe into volunteering in Impact Austin. It's not a requirement to be on the board that you have prior Impact Austin volunteer experience, but we do think it's important to help you understand the organization as well as having demonstrated time and talent, not just treasure, commitments to the organization. The most common question about board service I get is how much time is involved? What is how much time does it take to get the joy of volunteering as a board member? And we think it is about 15 to 20 hours a month. I talked to a couple other board members, and it is more if you become an officer, such as the president or the treasurer. I would also like to say that we're always evolving. One way relates to the additional financial commitment expected of board members. Similar to other nonprofit boards, our board members are expected to give money above their membership cost. I anticipate in the next few months, we will have a give-get policy that allows helping our fundraising team get financial contributions from others instead of having to donate all the additional dollars yourself. And this change in policy is just an example of some of the work that the governance committee does. Moving on to my last slide, which is board recruiting. I do want to emphasize that while there is structure to the candidate process, nothing about it should be intimidating. It's low-key and conversation focused. Pre-pandemic, we would often meet over a meal or beverage. For now, it's all on Zoom. And the current process is geared towards a new board class that would start July 1st. Most of our new board members join on July 1st. Sometimes it's January 1st. We do like to batch our new board members because we think it helps the new board member to be part of the class joining together. So there are other people with common experiences. Plus, it makes the onboarding process smoother. And we do have an onboarding process. While we have specific needs for finance, legal, and fundraising experience to supplement our current board members with these skills, basically we're trying to increase our bench strength in these areas. Our recruiting of candidates is by no means limited to these skill sets. Another focus is diversity. We know the current board is not as diverse as Impact Austin's membership or the community, and that is something we would like to see change. If you're interested in learning more about board service, including board committees, or have someone to suggest as a board candidate, please reach out to me or the Impact Austin office. Email addresses are shown on the screen. And in conclusion, there are 3 things I'd like you to walk away with for my brief time today. 1, the phrase joy of volunteering to describe Impact Austin's volunteer experiences. That board service is one of many excellent ways to volunteer, and specifically that you don't need to have board member experience to join our board, just a belief in our mission and a willingness to serve. And with that, I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, Lorene Lewis, Impact Austin Class of 2020, to talk about our advancement committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you. Yes, I am Impact Austin Class of 2020, which makes me feel a lot younger than I actually am. And before I get into my role on the Advancement Committee, I wanted to share just a quick intro about my journey to Impact Austin. I moved to Austin from Detroit about 1.5 years ago. And as I was getting settled into my new job and my new apartment, I was looking for ways to get involved in the community here and learn a little bit more about the city that I was going to call home. It was my first time out of Michigan, born and raised, and I was really interested in learning a little bit more about the community here. And through Google searches and meetings and works and networking coffees and happy hours, Impact Austin just kept coming up. And so I was getting really interested, and there happened to be one of those famous coffees that everybody is talking about. Yes, there was wine and hors d'oeuvres. And I was a little hesitant and nervous. I didn't really know many people in Austin, let alone walking into this group of women who I didn't know anyone. But I ended up leaving that membership info session with a handful of women who were offering me places to go for the holidays if I didn't have a place to go, if I couldn't make it back home to Detroit. And it kind of started to feel like home. But of course, I'm still a little hesitant. So I ended up attending the 2019 town hall a few weeks after that. And I had the pleasure of listening to Mimi Stiles give her pitch on the Innocence Initiative. And I got to witness the first social innovation grant being awarded to the Innocence Initiative. And I was blown away. And just learning from Mimi, I thought, I have to be a part of this. This is so cool. And somehow I ended up chairing the 2020 town hall, the virtual event, and got to meet Mimi and so many other women who were inspiring me throughout that year. And it was just a pleasure and a whirlwind all at once. And so I kind of want to reiterate that the volunteer experience and just getting involved with Impact Austin, you really get out of it what you put into it. So I kind of wanted to jump all the way in. And so I joined a couple of grant review committees, the grant finance committee, and that was a really good way to kind of get an understanding of Impact Austin. And then 1 year ago at Discovery Day, actually, right after, I attended the Downtown Zone lunch. And I had the pleasure of sitting next to Tracy Nelson and Susan Palumbo. And I feel like they kind of took me under their wings at that lunch. And I maybe made the mistake of mentioning that I am a fundraiser in my day job. And so I think their ears perked up a little bit and mentioned the advancement committee. So it was kind of a perfect combination of my skill set. But again, that hesitancy keeps coming back with different things. And I didn't want, obviously, a conflict of interest with the advancement committee, but I'm able to join that, share my knowledge. But because there are so many different roles within the advancement committee, it was a really smooth transition. So I can give you a little breakdown of the advancement committee and the different roles that exist there with that first slide. So the advancement committee is, of course, synonymous with fundraising and fund development and just different ways to advance the mission of Impact Austin. And we meet monthly and the first Tuesday of every month. So this should be really fresh in my mind because we had our meeting just a couple of hours ago. So as we know, the dues of Impact Austin being $1,250, that first $1,000 goes directly to the high impact grants that Impact Austin gives out. And then the $250 covers some of that operational support, the signature events that we host, the philanthropic educational events and different things like that, grant software, all of the fun stuff that we don't love to talk about, but we know exists. And that $250 only covers about half of some of those additional costs. So that's why the advancement committee does exist. I've listed out our subcommittees here. So you'll notice that we have event sponsorships and we have the Discovery Day sponsors that we're so thankful for that got their shout out at the beginning of this presentation. And moving on to corporate partnerships, that's kind of goes along with those event sponsorships. That's one way for corporations to get involved with Impact Austin. We obviously have such a great corporate network here in Austin of local companies, national, international companies who have a presence here or headquartered here. And there's so many women leaders in Austin, and we want them to not just support in these sponsorships, but really get involved and get their employees involved and kind of focus on different ways for companies to really partner with us, and not just financially, but through some of the philanthropic education events, which I will get to. And even if you don't want to join the advancement committee in that formal capacity, there's ways that you could make introductions to different companies or even just word of mouth. I mean, that's how I heard about Impact Austin originally. That's how a lot of people do. The more people that know about Impact Austin, the better. And then, of course, the easiest connection you can make with a corporate partnership is a lot of companies do a corporate match. So they can match your dues or any additional donations that you might make to our annual fund or endowment. So speaking of annual fund and endowment, those are both great ways to support the operational expenses of Impact Austin and really building kind of the infrastructure and the technology that exists here. And then, of course, grants and foundations. Obviously, we're a grant giving organization, but there are also foundations and things that we're building relationships with to, again, help with some of that infrastructure and things. So if you know of any grant opportunities, if you hear of anything, even just sending the link to the advancement committee and we can kind of tackle that. And this is kind of a good time to mention too that the advancement committee is not just about asking for money. I know how awkward it can be. I am a fundraiser through and through, so I hear no so many times, and talking about money can be a little uncomfortable. But there are other ways to be involved in the advancement committee. So copy editing, design, research, putting together prospect lists, making those connections. So it's not always just about the ask there. So there are a lot of different ways to get involved with the advancement committee, even if you don't want to be the one making that ask. And I'm a little biased, and that's why I gave this last subcommittee its own slide, the Philanthropic Education Committee. So I am the chair and sole member at the moment of the Philanthropic Education Subcommittee. You might recognize this slogan, the Give Like a Woman. And forgive me, I might get onto my philanthropic education soapbox here for a minute. I love this slogan. It's catchy, it's fun, but I had to dig into it a little bit deeper. I figured it was part of my role here. And so what does giving like a woman really mean? And thankfully, I didn't have to do all of the research because there is a Women's Philanthropy Institute, and their 2020 giving report has some amazing findings and a lot of really good research. But a couple of things I like to point out, some of the trends that exist are that women give more gifts than men and contribute a greater proportion of dollars than men. Women tend to give smaller gifts to men than men, and are more likely to give to smaller organizations as well. Women are more likely to use impact investing to complement their charitable giving, and men tend to replace their charitable giving with impact investing. And of course, women are inclined to give more than money, combining charitable donations with volunteer and board experience and service. And I mean, that's something that I'm also really passionate about, is volunteering and finding different ways to get involved, not just monetarily. And part of that comes from my nonprofit background. I can only give so much, but I love the opportunity to give my time if I can. And so overall, I think we're all here to make an impact. I think that's why we're on this call right now, not watching the UT Baylor game. There are so many other things we could be doing, but here we are as a group of women looking for other ways to get involved and increase our impact with Impact Austin. So this philanthropic education subcommittee works on different events and working with our membership and even outside the membership and the community to find ways to maximize our impact in the community. And I spend a lot of time working with donors in my day job and here to figure out the best ways of giving and any kind of tax benefits that may exist with that. So our events, and we're going to continue to do these, are based on impact investing or setting up donor advised fund, and we're always looking for other things people are interested in. We worked with some national organizations to talk about trust-based philanthropy and finding ways to implement that within our own organization and our GRCs, because we don't want to just talk about this. We really want to practice what we're preaching as the philanthropic education subcommittee. And with that, I will give you my shameless plug for the last two events for Discovery Days. And I know Lorene will mention this at the end, but we have two coming up. The first one is Friday. It's our corporate and social responsibility panel. So this is a great way, if you know of anybody, especially in the corporate sector, we're going to be talking a lot about employee resource groups and different ways that companies are engaging their employees, especially now while so many people are remote and volunteer opportunities aren't as cumbersome as they used to be. And there are a lot of different opportunities there. And then the following Friday, we are partnering with some of our community partners who will be talking about strength-based investment in low-income communities. So these are our next two events. And if they interest you at all, please join us and learn a little bit more about what we do as the Philanthropic Education Subcommittee with Advancement. And we'll be continuing events like this throughout the year as well. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who will be talking more about the Grant Review Committee and the process there. So let's welcome Connee Sullivan.
Hi, everyone. And Lauren, thank you very much. Well, we are an organization of many things, but we love our acronyms. So you've heard throughout the reference to GRC, that stands for Grant Review Committee. And that's what I'm going to speak about this evening. Before I do, I just want to give you a little background, very much similar to Lorene and Jenny and Lauren. I first was introduced to Impact Austin by a friend who urged me to go to a coffee with wine and joined up. I've served on 4 grant committees, twice as a co-chair, and this year I am serving as a grant review coordinator, a co-coordinator with the very able Karen McLinden, who's done this for many years. So I'm just following in her footsteps. I have always been drawn to the grant review committees because it is, in my mind, the heart of Impact Austin. It's what we're all about. But what really surprised me when I first started serving on a grant review committee was the diversity of members of the committee. It was just a pleasure to work with women from all over Austin, of all ages, with all kinds of backgrounds, personal and professional, that they brought to the experience. And I just love that. Every year, a different group, a lot of sometimes returning from one committee to another, but it's really a joy to be part of the greater Austin community through Impact Austin. The grant review committees. As I said, this is the heart of Impact Austin, because what we're all about is giving money away. We have 4 grant review committees for 4 focus areas: health and well-being, education, community, and equity. And typically each committee has 24 to 30 members per committee. And that consists of people who've done this for many, many years and others who are first timers. Each committee is led by an experienced co-chairs, as well as an advisor and shadow chairs. And shadow chairs is something to think about. We always look for leadership. And if you might be interested, you can step in as not only a member of the committee, but a shadow. Each committee starts with a large list of grant applications, anywhere from 30 to 50, sometimes more. And over the course of 3 to 4 months, we work mostly with a meeting once a month to select 2 finalists for the Impact Austin membership to vote upon. The grant review cycle it used to all be in the spring, but it has this year been broken down, as you heard Jenny refer, to a spring and a fall cycle. The spring cycle has the Education Grant Committee and the Community Grant Committee. And the fall cycle has the Health and Wellbeing Grant Committee and the Equity Grant Committee. For the 2 committees in the spring, as I said, we get down to 2 finalists, and the membership, the entire Impact Austin membership, will vote on those 2 finalists at the annual meeting in June. And for the 2 fall committees, the membership will vote at the town hall meeting in November. The process, and now I don't expect you to look at the detail on this chart. My purpose in sharing such a busy chart was just to communicate that we have a very well structured process for getting from those 50 plus applications down to 2 finalists. It's something that's been tested over time. It works beautifully. And I know almost everybody at the first meeting will say, oh my God, we're going to get from 50 applications to 2, really, in 4 meetings? But it does happen, and it happens because of this process that we've put in place. This year, the process is even better for 2 reasons. We've streamlined it. We've made it very much simpler for both participants on the grant committees, as well, and probably more importantly, for the applicants, because they're all busy trying to do their work in the community, and the last thing they need is a cumbersome process. But we also benefited from the work of the SIG grant, the Social Innovation Grant last year, that experimented with a more streamlined process. And we took a lot of what worked for that committee and applied it to all of the grants. And this year, we're doing all the grant, at least this spring, we're doing all of the grant review committee work virtually. And we learned quite a bit last year, as we had to, halfway through, convert our process to virtual to complete the cycle last spring. The grant committees are, as I said, 2 and 2 per season. We're just about to start the spring season, but if you're interested in jumping in before the fall season, we have other volunteer opportunities. Within the grants committee, there is a whole array of jobs, both sort of one-off, ad hoc, or more formal. The 2 most significant ones would be serving on the grant finance committee, where you actually do a deep dive into the finances of the nonprofit applicants, and the grants technology committee, which, well, that's pretty self-explanatory. So if you have any sort of technological background, we would love to have you there. Outside of the grants arena, we have a number of opportunities in addition to advancement that Lorene already spoke to. And some of the ones I wanted to highlight this evening are the Impact Austin Zones, which is more of a social outreach opportunity for our members to get to know each other better and have social opportunities outside of the grant process. The social opportunities are broken into zones, which are geographic, and each zone has their own sort of programs and activities that are really fun. And so we'd love to have you get involved in that if you're interested. Marketing, pretty self-explanatory, but Impact Austin does a lot of marketing and needs people with a number of different skill sets. And membership. Keeping not only recruiting, but keeping track of our membership list and all that that entails. So there are many ways. In fact, you can go to the Impact Austin website. If you're already a member, you can log into the member page and you will see a list of all of the various committees and volunteer opportunities. So why volunteer for Impact Austin? You know, it's funny, I think everybody comes to Impact Austin at a different point in their journey and have different reasons for joining. For some, it's to learn about philanthropy and more specifically about grant making, which is a much different thing than just attending a fundraiser or writing a check for somebody who knocks on your door for a donation. For others, it's people who are already, women who are already active as philanthropists, but they want to increase their impact through the power of collective giving. We have members who can give much larger amounts, but really enjoy the opportunity to work collectively with other women to learn the skill set and to share experiences. And we have others for whom a $1,250 check is a stretch. And the opportunity to put that to work with a much larger pool of funds and a much larger group of women and giving collectively is a tremendous opportunity. And finally, some people just get involved in Impact Austin because they want to meet other wonderful women from all over the greater Austin area. And as I say on the slide, why not all three reasons to join? So we hope that you will consider volunteering with Impact Austin, and all of us on this panel are happy to talk to you about it. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Lorene, who will facilitate the Q&A.
I hope that you have a very clear picture of how we operate and the fact that everyone is welcome. There is a place for you. There's a seat at the table. And it's a wonderful opportunity to learn more about issues that are facing the Austin community. And as Lorene said, there's a lot of research that indicates that women are a little more philanthropic, I should say a lot more philanthropic than men. In fact, I don't know of any male organization that has nearly the impact and or for the community in which they serve and live, but it really is a great opportunity and you will learn so much in a relatively short period of time, alongside other people who are vested in learning more about how to serve the community in a very, very impactful way.
One question I saw that came in, Lorene, was about, can you talk a little bit about, and maybe Connee might speak to this too for grants, but can you join a committee with a friend? I know a lot of people oftentimes join with a friend at the same time, and is it possible for them to serve on the same committee?
We would love for you to, when you register, to indicate that you have a friend you'd like to serve with. We will just do a couple of things. We'll make sure that there are no conflicts. We run a conflicts check against your personal involvement on boards or employment with the nonprofits that are making applications. If there are conflicts with a particular committee, then we ask you to serve on a different committee.
Okay, here's one that asks, do two grants get selected each cycle, one for each committee, or is just one selected from the top 4 finalists?
Each grant committee will come down to 2 finalists that will go to the full membership for a vote. In our current construct, both of those finalists will get a grant. The nonprofit that gets the most votes from the general membership will get roughly 80% of the grant money for that grant. And the second highest vote getting nonprofit will get the other 20%. The 20% grant will be just a unrestricted grant for them to use as they please. The larger grant will be subject to our grant review process, but both finalists will become community partners of Impact Austin. So at the end of the full year, 2 grant cycles, we will give out a total of 8 grants, 2 in each focus area.
Oh, here's one. Curious as to whether you can volunteer without officially becoming a member to get your feet wet.
So officially, having read our bylaws, I don't think so. Unofficially, we'll figure out how to make it work if you want to learn more about Impact Austin. And as was mentioned earlier, for members where the financial commitment of membership is maybe too steep, we also work with folks to figure out how to make it happen. So if you aren't sure you're ready to commit 100% to Impact Austin, but interested in volunteering, reach out to Nicole in the office at contact@impactaustin.org, or to me. My email was shared earlier, and I'm happy to work with you to figure out how we can get you engaged so you can assess whether or not you're ready to make the membership commitment, or if you need help.
Okay, there is a question about when we return to our normal process, which would be to have in-person meetings. Will we still have the option for virtual attendance at that point? I don't know that I know what the answer to that is, but I think that given how we've handled this pandemic and the options that we've had to employ to get around it, there's probably going to be some different ways to do our business. But I will just tell you from my experience, the in-person meetings were delightful, and they gave you an opportunity to meet other Impact Austin people. You can meet them through Zoom, of course, but to see them face to face, to get to know them, and that sort of contact, that person-to-person contact, is priceless. However, where we have the meetings will depend on where we can get some space. In the past, we've had them at churches and other places where the members have some contact, because as you know, that space can be pretty expensive. So we were able to use churches, and it's a very, very good experience, and we always had a little refreshment to go along with it. So we may be able to do a combination of both. I just don't know at this point. Jenny, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd add that it also depends on whether you're asking about overall member events, such as annual meeting, town hall, or the Discovery Days we're doing now, versus individual committees or GRCs. Everybody's a little different. And I know some of the board committees, as far as I know, meet 99.9% of the time virtually, even before the pandemic. So it really depends on what you're talking about, whether it's our normal signature events or some of the committees. We try to be as friendly to our committee member schedules as we possibly can by respecting their time and meeting virtually, and trying to meet when it accommodates everybody on the committee.
Okay, here's a question about when can they expect notification of whether or not they have been able to join the committee, the grant review committee of their choice.
Yeah, we are going to finalize the lists on the 9th, which is next week. And so members will be notified shortly thereafter which committee they're on. And
So I have a question for the panelists. Would you each share your favorite Impact Austin volunteer experience?
So I'll go first. I don't know if I can choose because I love my board service for so many reasons, but I also loved my first GRC, and that's where everything else came out of. So I hate to say it, I can't give a definitive answer.
I can go. I really enjoyed chairing town hall. It was a virtual event this year, so there were a lot of fun moving pieces. And because it was virtual, we were able to bring in Pia and Dimple, who are renowned in the trust-based philanthropy world. And they got to share so much information with us, and it was limited to 45 minutes, but I could have listened to them talk for hours and hours. And I think I was most excited that knowing that our GRCs are already implementing some of those best practices, and I know are continuing to do so. So I think that Impact Austin really taking a lead in the trust-based philanthropy game, and has been such a great volunteer opportunity for me.
for me, it's site visits every year, but I certainly remember site visits my first year. Not only the thrill of actually, after doing all the work on these nonprofits, going in and meeting the people and seeing it all firsthand, but just the experience of a day and a half of rushing around from nonprofit to nonprofit with meetings, breakfasts, lunches, and wrap-up sessions afterward with all the committee members that were participating. It's a hectic and crazy and really fun time. So site visits for sure.
Well, thank you, ladies. Mine is much like Connie's. The site visits are so special, and going from agency to agency with the checks and watching the faces of the executive directors and the staff as they are presented and on the steps of the city council. So it's really heartwarming to see how that's done, and that your dollars do make an impact, and you're there when those checks are presented. And so you get to see the full cycle, if you will, from putting your money on the table with the other women in a collective manner, going through the process of reviewing all of the grants, attending the town hall meeting where we make the decisions, and then the icing on the cake is to go to those agencies and present those checks. So with that, I think we are done for the evening. I thank you so very much to the participants. And what I will say to anyone who is listening that is not a member of Impact Austin, I don't know what you're waiting for. You have no reason to be afraid. Please come in, help us do this work, and make a greater impact in the Austin area. And most of all, rest assured that it's women who are doing this work and making an impact. And we're not just talking about it, we are actually doing something about it. So I don't know how you can stand on the sidelines. That's just a very selfish thing for me to say. But please come in, be a part of the organization, and help make significant improvements in the lives of people in our community. So with that, I thank you very much. And the next two events have already been mentioned. One is this Friday on corporate social responsibility, and then a week from this Friday, the 12th, strength-based investments in low-income communities. So please join us, and we thank you for your support.